Thank you very much for having me here this afternoon. It is both my pleasure and being an ex-senator, not senator, unlike the House of Reps, when a House of Reps member has finished their term, they go back to civil life. If they've been a minister, they will have the title, the Honourable. Senators are different. Once you swear allegiance to the Crown, you serve the rest of your life. You may not be in Parliament, but the moment you are aware of any wrong, you are duty-bound to do your best in actually have that addressed. So, what made me get up one morning and sit down behind the steering wheel? And I think now collectively I've done over 100,000 kilometres doing what I'm doing. To get down here and over to WA in the last little bit over 8 weeks, I've done 8,000 kilometres. But I enjoy doing what I'm doing because I know it has to be done. So, what I'm asking everyone here, not physically at the moment, to stand up and wake up. Wake up what is happening around you. Now, I'm going to briefly go through a situation, and I'm going to ask how many of you have heard of an organisation called ICLEI, I-C-L-E-I. All right, so there are a couple. Right. When you're driving around Adelaide and you're bothered by these push bike lanes where they've taken a 4-lane road, put a skinny section that you can't even park a car on, and then a bike lane and 1-lane road. Would you believe that that is being administered from Bonn in Germany? Unbelievable. Come on, where have we gone? It's gone to sleep, has it? Darren! No, we're back. So this is ICLEI. Australia sits within the Oceania sector of ICLEI. So the ICLEI stands for the International Coalition of Local Environment Initiative. Sounds really lovely, doesn't it? No. Yeah. Anybody recognise that? Can somebody tell me? It's definitely one of them. I thought somebody would know which one it was. Yeah. So there is over 700 hectares of parks in Adelaide. Adelaide has a population of approximately 1.2 million. And the Adelaide City Council is a member of ICLEI. Yes. Yeah. And Adelaide in October last year won its spot as one of the top 7 smart cities in the world. So, hands up anyone who pays rates here. Yeah, we all do. Are you happy that the Adelaide City Council's fee for being part of ICLEI is $1.2 million a year? Get up your councillors. At the end, there is a way of resolving this. So it's National Heritage-ly listed, has the largest urban park system in Australia, and that contributes to it being listed as one of the most livable cities. So, ICLEI, well, that's their blurb. I tell you what, how many people know how to use the snip? The snipping tool. Yes, yeah. It's it's Alt, the Microsoft logo, and S. You're going to see a lot of it. So ICLEI's network is united around the world. There are over 2,500 cities and local councils who are part of ICLEI, and they control all regulations that are used here in Adelaide. So how do they achieve that? Very simply, through the REISA, your Real Estate Institute of South Australia. As I said before, a part of ICLEI, which is called the ICC, so be careful if you're using Uncle Goggle to find out where the ICC is. You'll end up on the International Cricket Code. You'll have to put the words in. International Code Council. So it heads up the group that actually formulate the regulations. Anything from lighting to roads, swimming pools, your car, mechanical, the whole lot. Not only do they create the regulations, but then they are part of enforcing them. So they have product testing, and later on in a couple of other slides, they will actually sign off on extremely large construction. So there's just a handful of the codes. Somebody who's quicker than I can count them up. If you've got a loose $1,000 that you're not doing anything with, you can actually get it electronically now. $1,000. So every council in Australia will have purchased that. So what have we got there? My eyes are getting real bad. Oh, the mechanical code. Can't read the rest of them. Yeah, yeah, fuel gas. Yeah. There's the new ones. I started on this back in about 2014. Ickley itself used to be housed in the town hall in Toronto, Canada. They were there for 12 years. And a lady I know over there was working for some of the big developers. She was there during that whole period. And all the meetings that she went to, they never identified themselves once, not in 12 years. And after that 12 years, they transferred to Bonn in Germany. Last year, Ickley shut down 4 major cities around the world. Hamburg was one of them, and no vehicles were allowed into Hamburg at all for that month. So there were 3 others. It was a trial to see how it would work. So the smart cities, everyone is supposed to be domiciled within 15 minutes of the city centre. And you only have to pull up a Google on the city centre of Toronto. There's 8 million people living in inner city Toronto. Amazing. So your only modes of travel are going to be this: taxis, buses, or trains. Other than that, it's push bikes. So we're going to have a lot of very, very fit Aussies pedalling 15 kilometres into town. This is San Carlos in California. The people there got sick of exactly what is happening to us now, and they pressured their actual city council so hard that they were forced, the council was forced to actually stop funding Ickley. Now, as the last count I saw through America, there were 14 major cities in America who've withdrawn from being part of Ickley. I tried to get that up as it was actually the meeting where the vote was put, and the councillors voted to withdraw. So now you know who is making your life difficult. You know how widespread it is. It's through all developing countries. How do you fight the International Code Council and Ickley? There's your answers. Ask questions of your local council, state and federal government. Hit them all. Invite the local people to information evenings. Now, I know all of your groups are doing that, and good on you. Write letters to the editor. If you've got any little local newspapers, write a notice to them and say this is what Ickley has down the road has in store for us. Print leaflets, work out how to use the snipping tool, take it straight out of their own words, and establish a local council group, appoint a committee to actually monitor what your council is doing, organise local groups to work together. So this is too big and too important to try and oppose individually. As I say, I'm nearly 10 years. Next year will be the 10th year that I have been letting people know about Ickley. you want to do questions? No, we'll do questions later. Yep. Now all I've got to do is find the other PowerPoint. It's in here somewhere. And this is my main focus now. I just thought, look, there's such a good group here. It's worthwhile spending a few minutes to let you know about ICLEI. So, title deeds do not exist anymore. Now this, I'd been working on this for about 18 months, asking all the questions. Do you want to swap seats? And anyone else who's over there, there's a few spare ones over here, if you'd be more comfortable for you. Okay, it took me about 18 months and a very, very hot email from a director of PEXA. PEXA is Purcell, blah, 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 a private company. And he quite strongly told me that PEXA does not hold title deeds. What has actually happened to our titles is that they are now only exist in a piece of binary code that sits behind a program. It has your lot number and your name. And that is the only thing that exists today that associates your property to you. Having said that, I'll give you an example why you protect what you have got, irrespective of anyone telling you that it has no legal standing. A friend of mine up on, this is years ago, back in the 70s, up in Tamborine Mountain, up behind the Gold Coast. This lady's grandmother and her family ended up in the Russian side of Berlin. Eventually, they were able to escape out of it, and she brought out with her the deeds to the family home. Now, obviously I can't use the lady's name, but we'll say it was E. In 2008, she started negotiations with the Berlin council and government, because it's obviously unified then. And in 2008, she was paid the 2008 value of her grandmother's home. Now, if a title deed out of Germany gives rights and privileges, right, hang on to what you have got. As somebody said earlier on, doesn't matter whether it's a parchment title or a certificate of title or just any document from, I think it's Western Australia that has Landgate. What's your... Land Services, yeah. Yes. You should be able to get that for between $27 and $80, somewhere in the... Don't go to your bank, they'll charge you $400 for it. You're not asking for a title, right? What you're asking for is a copy of the record that's held on either PEXA's or Simply Australia's computers. Now, ironically, you can't access, and neither can I, can access either of those two private computers. But the last time I checked, there were 8 corporate companies who would sell you a copy of what is on PEXA or Simply Australia. While he's sorting that out, I just want to run through a couple of Acts of Parliament. What we have in Queensland is Micah Hearn passed this Act which actually set aside Her Majesty's letters patent that she issued in 1985, because in the last paragraph of that she required the Governor or Governor-General to submit the names of the Governor that was being appointed. And of course they're sitting in their False Australia Act, where the Premier of the state actually appoints the Governor. And the most ridiculous example that I can give you of how preposterous that is, in New South Wales, 3 weeks before the last election, the Premier of the state sacked the Governor, went to the election, he lost the election, so there's no Governor to swear in the new Premier-elect, so the Premier-elect had to appoint a Governor so the Governor could swear him in as Premier. Now that is how stupid it is. This is why we want our Constitution back. So that was Mr. Micah Hearn, who actually... Whoa, what have we got happening? Oh, he's working somewhere else. Yeah, so then following that, we had a famous Wayne Goss who actually brought in an act called the Reprints Act. So in Queensland, the reprint is supposed to allow the government just to correct for errors, but can't change the actual style of that act. Well, here's one where they have. This is the Queensland Futures Fund. It was formerly the Debt Reduction Saving Act of 2021. So they have actually totally rewritten the Act, and it has the most astounding things in it that I have ever seen in a piece of legislation. In part 4, right, we're up and away. I'll just finish this, yep. I'll make sure I keep moving it. In section 4, it allows to transfer assets and liabilities to a private company. So they set up a private company, Titles Queensland. They moved $5 billion into it. Why? I haven't been able to work out why. And then just a little bit further in the legislation, it tells you that Titles Queensland will collect a fee for every land transaction in Queensland, and they can keep it. It even goes one further, if I can find it, to decide, collect and keep title registry amounts, and then over here, the title registry amounts does not form part of consolidated funds. So we have governments who are actually stepping outside of the Constitution and creating companies to actually run departments. And we'd better move on before we... Come on. Oh, we're at the bottom. Whoops. Yeah, City of Adelaide. Oh, it is too. Yeah, I know. Bugger. Oh dear, oh dear. What are you saying to do? Oh, right, yeah, that'll get rid of it. No. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So back to the Constitution. That is my Constitution, and I think quite a few people here have one. That's 1,006 pages. It recorded every single meeting that was held between 1883 and 2000. And the first part of the Constitution itself actually is the English Empowering Act. So I'll pass this down to somebody. If you can keep it open and pass it around. So the way an Act of Parliament works, right? It has to have four things. It must have a defined power, it must have a dictionary, and it also, power, jurisdiction, and dictionary. So an act without a power and the jurisdiction is where that power can be exercised is a nonsense. So I go looking for where the power for an act comes from. So the power for our Constitution is those first 9 sections that's being passed around now. We'll put it over here later on, and you can actually take a screenshot of it. So the Commonwealth of Australian Constitution binds each state and territory to function within the granted powers expressed within the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act 1900. And that is the start of our Constitution. Now we move over to COAG. How many people here have heard of or know what COAG is? Yeah, a few, right. COAG is the coalition of Australian governments. It's a boys' club. Well, there are a few ladies in there now. There is no constitutional standing for COAG, and there is no state or federal government power or act to actually support COAG. Recently, I think it was, anyhow, they morphed it from COAG into the National Cabinet, and then tried to claim that anything that happened within the National Cabinet was privileged and wasn't subject to FOI. So the High Court soon sorted that out. So what we actually have is every Premier and the Chief Executive Officer of the two territories going off, having a meeting and deciding that they are going to change how every one of you, your land transactions are dealt with. Not their Parliament, not their Cabinet, not the people in Adelaide. They decided themselves. Barry O'Farrell brought a New South Wales Act to COAG, and when all of this, or 75% of the premiers had accepted it, the other 25% are automatically bound, because that was how COAG was set up. And they have intergovernment agreements that never see the light of day in a parliament. So what did COAG do? Once everyone had decided that they were going to adopt the electronic lodgement from New South Wales, and interesting, South Australian government cannot alter that commitment. It will take 75%, in other words, 3/4 of all of the other states to agree to any change. So, first thing they did was created an entity called ARNEC, so that's the Australian Register's National Electronic Conveyancing Council. Once they had done that, then ARNEC itself then created the Electronic Lodgement Network. The next thing they did was to develop the Electronic Conveyancing National Law. Now, every state now has actually passed an act to implement that. So still no debating in your parliament as to whether the parliament can or can't stop that. No. All they're doing, or the only option they have, is to accept it as it is. Then the last one that they created was the Electronic Lodgement Network Operators. And there are two of them. One is PEXA. Now, PEXA is interesting. How many people have heard of BlackRock? Yeah. Okay. Anyone else that hasn't heard of it, that says, oh, that's, you know, just a fairy tale. Believe you me, it is not a fairy tale. BlackRock holds the greatest superannuation trusts of anywhere in the world. Now, it has an equal, but not in superannuation. This other entity is called Link, L-I-N-K. BlackRock holds a substantial parcel of Link's shares. Link holds a substantial part of BlackRock. Link owns PEXA. Well, they have 42% of it. They control it. And PEXA currently carries out over 80% of all the land transactions, including the physical finance settling. So gone are the days when you go to the bank on settlements day and one person the bank will hand over the cheque and the previous owner gets the funds. This is now all done electronic, and you don't sign anything other than signing a piece of paper for somebody else to sign for the transfer of your land, because they have to have a digital signature that is acceptable to either PEXA or simply Australia. So I'm getting ahead of myself. Yeah. So in 2013, they all adopted the principle of electronic lodgement, and knowing in doing so, none of the individual states after can alter without the consent of all the other states. So ARNEC, it's a body that's established by COAG. It facilitates and implements the management of and the regulatory arrangements of real estate in Australia. So one of the big downfalls in this, while we had titles offices that were statutory bodies, every one of you here today had the right to actually take out an FOI on your property's lot number. You cannot affect a FOI on either PEXA or simply Australia. The next thing, they created model participation rules. So that governs all of the land transactions through the whole of Australia. They determine the rules. This now will be the National Cabinet. Now, one of the main issues or concerns that all of the colonies had running up to 1900 and the Commonwealth being established was they were concerned about this entity that they were about to agree to being created. They were worried that it would end up all so powerful and then just ride roughshod over all of the states. So the colonies did not transfer to the Commonwealth any power whatsoever over land. And the most emphatic example of that is in 93, when Paul Keating brought in the Native Title Act. He forced, or tried to force, every state to mirror that so it could be implemented, because there's no power for the federal government to walk onto your property or whatever. So Western Australia told Mr Keating in no untermed to shove his native title where the sun never shines. So between 1993 and 1998, Western Australia continued to issue mining tenure without native title. in Queensland, Peter Beattie just dropped the axe on all my applications for mining tenure and never issued a mineral licence between 93 and 98. So that just proves conclusively that the Commonwealth has no power over your land use. Now there's a very famous High Court ruling in 1927, and it's called Commonwealth versus New South Wales. The essence of it was New South Wales had transferred parcels of land to the Commonwealth for building railways, post offices, all of the airports. Well, I don't know whether there were too many airports, but it was for the federal government to be able to provide services. At some stage, it was found that there were very valuable minerals on some of those parcels of land. So New South Wales tried to say, well, yes, we transferred you the land, but we kept the minerals. And of course, the High Court ruled that correctly, that the rights of the terminology is disponeur, which is the Crown, travel to the disponee, which is the purchaser. All rights of the Crown transfer save for those that are named in the deed of grant. And this is another interesting thing that has disappeared with the electronic lodgement. Since the event of electronic lodgement, there is no mention whatsoever of any reservations for the Crown. The purpose of reservations for the Crown is that the state would then get the revenue from whatever the mining companies have to pay as royalties, which then comes to us. So when you hear people talking about things being reserved to the Crown, in actuality it's reserved so we get the benefit or some benefit from it. Okay, so the next thing is the electronic lodgement network operators. So prior to that, your local real estate person could organise the contracts and everything. On the day of settlement, sometimes it was even effected in the real estate's office. Mainly though, it was done at a bank where the funds were transferred and the title was transferred as well. None of that happens now. Yes, your real estate person, you still negotiate with them, but they have to have a dongle which they pay a fee for every year, and for them to be able to either access PEXAs or simply Australia's mainframes for it to be completed. So everything has moved out of your jurisdiction in South Australia. So where I was going, I apologise, with the Commonwealth having no jurisdiction over land, what the premiers have done now in actually accepting the electronic lodgement, who controls that? The National Cabinet. So every Premier and Chief Executive Officers in the territories have actually handed their control over land use in their state to the Commonwealth, which was what the actual colonies at Confederation were worried about. So there's PEXA. They are listed on the stock exchange, but they are a limited company. They're not a proprietary limited. When I pulled that, their shares were worth $11.67. Now, either Link or PEXA, along with the Commonwealth Bank and Chase Manhattan, Stanley and Morgan, actually provided $600 million for the program that this electronic lodgement is actually operated on. So that is not even a government department. That is private property of the group that provided the seed funding. So if you're tossing $600 million into the can, you're not going to be satisfied with the odd $197 fee that either PEXA or Simply Australia receive. So, anyone want to look in their crystal ball, do a bit of gazing and come up with any idea how they're going to get their return on their $600 million investment? No, even that won't do it. Not at $197. It's called monetarising the asset. So their asset is they own the program, okay? Can you think of somebody else who's done that in the past? No. Well, yes, they do in a sense. What about Microsoft, Bill Gates? Just cast your mind back 10, 15 years. When you bought a computer, you physically bought a program that you owned and you loaded it on the laptop or workstation. What happens today with Microsoft 365? You pay a fee every month. You imagine receiving that from everyone around the world that owns a computer, including governments. I'm predicting that at some time in the future, Link or PEXA or Stanley and Morgan will be saying, oh, we've altered our use contract and now you're going to pay us $10 a month for us to store your information. It's not a title deed. That's what I think is down the road. Okay. That's a blurb that I found on the ABA, that's the Australian Bank Association. They have actually been pushing for electronic lodgement, and somewhere in there it does give us a date. Well, in January 10, but I think it's even before. So the banks are behind this push to go to the electronic lodgement. And that's just a little bit more from the background of the banks. Sorry, it's a bit small. So that's Simply Australia. That's you can get that either way, just by Googling Simply, SYMPLI, or the correct name, Simply Australia Proprietary Limited. And the banks, in their statement, were saying that the reason for going to electronic lodgement is that it will be quicker and it will eventually result in lower fees. Where have we heard that before? Yes. Yeah. Everyone finished with that? Before we go nine eyes? So then the electronic conveyancing national law, I've got the Queensland copy here if somebody would like to see it. Everything that I've shared with you today is backed by legislation. It's not Len Harris's idea of something. It is all there in Acts of Parliament. So the electronic conveyancing national law governs the provision and operation of electronic conveyancing in Australia. It was first implemented, as I said, by Barry O'Farrell in New South Wales in 2012. He took it to what was then COAG. COAG, the premiers actually accepted it, and we're in the pickle that we are today. Prior to them doing this, every one of your titles were legal. You could take your parchment or your piece of paper into your bank and say, I just want a pencil mortgage for 10 grand, and hand that over. They are now saying that all of your historical certificates or title deeds, the parchment ones, are merely historical documents that you can frame and put up on the wall and look at. The audacity of them.
So none of what they've done is legal?
No, because they've actually stepped totally. It's not that they've offended the Constitution, they've stepped outside it. Yeah, yes, the very people that we elected to actually protect us and to make sure that our rights and privileges are kept, they're the ones who are taking them away. I'll be quick, I'm getting a notice, I think. So, there is no power within the Constitution to dispense or transfer land of the Crown through proprietary limited corporations. All land transaction within the Commonwealth should be transacted directly between the Crown and the purchaser in fee simple, as expressed in every proclamation of every state. Queen Victoria established that. In Queensland, she empowered Ferguson Bowen to actually create the Legislative Council, the Upper Council and the Federal Council. Maybe another day I'd love to walk all through that for you as well. Then totally separate, and actually I have them here. Can we start those two over that side, please? That's actually an exact copy of Ferguson Bowen's letters patent for him to be the Governor of Queensland, and it's accompanied by a second document which are the instructions. Then she says something quite unique in there, in Ferguson Bowen's letters patent. After she's told him to do that, she tells him to create the folios, employ people to make entries into the folios. The land had to be surveyed, given a lot number, and sold at public auction. She instructed Governor Ferguson to do that, not the Parliament. And then interestingly, she then went on to say, and all governors to take note. So in setting out that Ferguson Bowen, the first governor of Queensland, was the only singular person in his role of representing the Crown to dispense land of the Crown. So, no state government actually has any power or jurisdiction to pass laws over fee simple. So what do? They actually create freehold. Another minute. 5? Thank you. Sorry. No, this is really, really important, because through the REI, and I've got to stop there, I'm REIQ of Queensland, but REISA have a pro forma for a contract when you're purchasing property or selling it. And the purchaser is asked a question twice. The first, well, they're both the same. Are you applying for leased land, or are you applying for freehold land? There is nothing there in relation to fee simple. So I've been for 3 years telling people, if you're buying a property, take your ball pen, not at one of the later ones, draw yourself a square, write beside it, in fee simple, and tick it and initial it. Because every time, and I've done it before, buying land, I wasn't aware of this, in 1970. The moment you tick the box, you are purchasing a freehold property. You just put yourself under all of their legislation. I will, if I ever get the time. I have a document where you can revoke all contracts and all perceived contracts between yourself, your property, and your local council. Well, I've got to update that now and make one up that you are actually revoking your contract when you purchase the property under freehold. And the reason you can do that is they have withheld information to disadvantage you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Len, for that. So now we're going to have the